Hey everyone, this is Daniel,
And I'm Jun,
and we are
Korean.
American. June, did I start early?
Yeah, I think so.
We
I don't
can
know.
mute it.
Yeah,
The time has come.
the time has come.
Today's the day.
Today's the day. I'm surprised that I agreed to do this. But we had to do it sometime, I
We
think.
had to do it. It was inevitable.
Yeah.
Today is the day, June. We are going to talk about what to many people is seen and considered as one of the major cultural foundations
Yeah.
and cornerstones
Yeah.
of Korean culture and identity. Do you know what it is?
Yeah, Han.
Because we talked about it before.
I was just expecting you to say Han, and I was just like
Waiting.
preparing to do it in a synchronous way. I don't know why. I thought you were
Oh.
going for that. And I kept on trying to do Han, and then you just added more descriptions to it.
I was building up the anticipation.
Teamwork, man.
You see you would say Han at the same time. Ready?
No, I think it's cringe.
하나, 둘,
둘,
셋.
셋.
Han.
Okay.
Just in case we want to put it in.
Okay.
But yeah, June. To most, we discussed the other one before, which is Jong.
Song, yeah.
But to most Korean Americans, and also maybe Westerners in general, as they're starting to get into Korean culture, etc.,
Yeah.
they always hear these two terms, Han and Jung. Anyway, we've talked about Jung briefly, but today I think we should tackle Han.
Okay, the reason that I was refraining from doing both episodes of Jung or Han was because, number one, I think it's pretty irrelevant in modern Korea. At least that's what I thought. And also, I think personally, I don't like to talk about things that are very vague and too abstract, but people try to think that it is something, I think that's just a personal preference. So like whenever you brought up the topic of Han, which we do a lot in like our personal conversations, I try to just like say, no, that's like not a thing.
Yeah.
That Korean people pretend that it's a thing. But then after doing some research and doing some self-reflection,
Yeah.
I realized that I'm maybe too like shooting it down as if it's nothing. But there is some substance, I think. So now I'm ready to talk about it.
Okay, let's get into it.
Yes.
But before we do, June, the fact that I love talking about these vague, abstract concepts,
Yeah.
and you don't, I think also mirrors the fact that our Myers-Briggs MBTIs are exactly opposite.
Our Myers-Briggs are exactly opposite. No, it's
Pretty
not.
sure.
No, it's not. I'm an...
Oh, okay, wait. Oh, was the one exact opposite.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it mirrors that.
Maybe the...
Anyway.
Because you stuff. And I stuff.
We have not mentioned MBTI before, which we will have to at some point as well.
Do we want to cut this off? Because
we will cut this off.
Okay.
No, we'll
Bleep it out.
no, we'll foreshadow it. Yeah.
Okay, well...
Yeah, exactly. Bleep it out. The third pillar of Korean society and culture is
Yes.
MBTI.
Yes.
Han, Jung, and MBTI. Okay. No, June, really, before we get into Han, though,
Yeah.
let's talk about a few things Han is not. Because when I first heard the term, too, I was a little bit confused. Maybe. Anyway, is this the same Han as, like, the last name in Korean Americans, like HAN, Han?
No, it's not.
Different characters.
Different
Different
character.
meaning.
Different meaning.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about when I did my 23andMe like DNA test, I found out my dad's cultural DNA or whatever. My dad's DNA was 100% Han Chinese. Same Han or different Han?
Different Han.
대한 민국, same Han, different Han?
Different Han.
That Han's the same as Han Chinese Han.
It might be.
Okay, anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
So, June, why don't you tell me what Han is before I read maybe the Wikipedia definition?
Before telling me my version of what Han is, I also want to mention my personal objective of the podcast today. I
Okay.
want to demystify it and objectify it so that we can apply it to a universal level. Because I think this could apply to a global level.
Which
The
is
thing-
often some of the pushback from Koreans, which is like, is Han and Jung unique to Korea?
Exactly.
Or is it
The thing
universal?
that I want to challenge today, that it is a very unique thing to Korea. Of course, it has some color, but I feel like it could be universally applied. And I'll give you some examples where everyone could have felt Han in their lives.
I'll look forward to that
Yeah.
because I do not think Americans would resonate with Han at all.
Yeah. Okay, let's try that.
Okay, let's
Because
do
there's a personal level and there's a national level of Han. And of course, you can't apply a national level of Han, but you can apply a personal level of Han in anyone's lives, I believe.
Okay, that I would believe, but all right, you're already getting to one of the main conclusions I was hoping to bring,
Okay.
which is there's like a cultural, national, collective Han, which I think Korea embodies.
Yeah,
But for me, there's like a personal, individual level of Han
exactly.
that everyone could embody.
Yeah. That was our conclusion today.
Yeah. But you already got there. We'll cut it out.
Interesting. Anyways, okay. So I did some research last night.
Yes.
And synthesizing a lot of sources that I saw yesterday, which is not a lot, but anyways, I think a good definition of Han in English would be, and tell me if you resonate with this, a clot of unresolved negative emotions in our minds.
A clot?
Yeah.
Or clod? What is a clot?
A clot.
Like a blood clot? Like
Yeah,
a clot?
yeah.
Oh. I've never heard clot used outside of blood clot. Sorry.
It is a clot though. And I'll explain to you why it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about just a bundle? No? Clot feels different?
A bundle sounds too objective. I don't know.
Objective. Oh, also, Jun, I was going to make this joke
Because that's
earlier.
a negative thing, huh? Yeah.
Because you said one of your goals in the episode is to objectify the meaning.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, Jun, objectify it. Because objectify is almost always used in a negative context.
Really?
In America.
What's a more neutral way to objectify things?
I don't even... I mean, you know, the U.S., usually in the U.S., it's used to like take a person and turn them into a thing. Yeah, objectify that. Like,
like
women are
objectifying
objectified.
women.
Yes, that's how it's
Interesting.
usually used.
What was the word that I was going for then?
I'm not sure. What are you trying to say? To make it more concrete?
Yeah, because it's a very subjective thing, and I want to objectify it.
So not make it subjective.
Yeah.
Or up to interpretation.
Uh-huh.
Make it more concrete. Maybe objectify is the right word, but anyway.
Anyways.
Now I'm questioning, why is there not a good word for...
It's really becoming an English content.
This is fan service to all our Korean fans, too.
What, I'm learning English too. I was like, oh.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, never mind. I was going to say objecticize.
Okay. Rational? No. Subjective?
Oh, rationalize is a good
Maybe
one.
rationalize, but that's also like...
But it's not the opposite of
It's not.
subjectiveness.
I mean, objective is objective the opposite of subjective? I think you're right. Sorry, where were we though?
Wait, I said a clot of unresolved negative emotions in our mind, and you said maybe.
Oh yeah, I was making fun of
Yeah,
clot.
maybe you want
Use bundle.
bundle is too. It's like a bundle of joy, kind of. I want to like clot is like a
clot.
blood clot.
A blood clot. Yeah.
I think I get that.
Like a
sense
jam,
of-
a jam. Dam is a good
clot.
word too, because it's like blocking the water from flowing.
Kind of.
That's how I think Americans would probably say dam of instead of.
But you know, there's a word that when Korean people try to describe it in Korean language, there's a word that they use a lot when describing Han, which is 응어리.
And that
응어리?
translates directly to clot.
I don't know if it's a good translation, but I think there's a similar feeling to it. That's
Okay.
why I use clot.
Sorry, I don't know why I was laughing then. Maybe you should define it again.
A clot of unresolved negative emotions in our
Okay.
minds.
Okay.
I don't know. Let's see if it makes sense.
Yeah. Do you want me to quote the Wikipedia definition?
Yes, please.
Han is a concept of an emotion variously described as some form of grief or resentment, among others, that is said to be an essential element of Korean identity by some and a modern post-colonial identity by others. And it goes on for some more.
But it's not describing what it is.
It said some form of grief or resentment.
Okay. So basically it's saying Han is some form of grief or resentment.
Okay, and
That's
I
it.
guess I'll go. Sorry, that was maybe just the intro. And then it says in definitions, it says Han is derived from the Chinese character something, which means resentment, hatred, or regret. And then it says definitions and characteristics of Han are highly subjective. And then it goes on to list basically like 10 different, 15 different perspectives on it. Yeah. So it's very vague, and
Yeah.
it says it's subjective. Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure it's more elaborately explaining in the entire full version of the wiki. But the reason why I don't think that's a good definition is because it tried to use other like definitions to describe it.
Ah, yes.
Whereas like this is just a cloud of unresolved negative emotions. It's more trying to describe what it is without using another word.
Like
I guess.
resentment, hatred, anger.
And again, now that I'm looking at my description again, I like it because clot is the opposite of resolved, and it says clot of unresolved negative. And I think the very important point is that it's unresolved. Like there is some emotion that is unresolved that you're just preserving. Okay. During my internet research of Han,
Yes.
one of the explanations that I really resonated with and I thought was a very good explanation,
Okay.
it's a tool for Korean people to carry on with their lives even when they have that feeling of resentment or grief. So a good analogy that I saw was if you put soil or dirt in a cup of clear water, right? What happens?
It settles to the bottom.
But it, like in the beginning,
It's
you see
swirling
that
around.
it's swirling around.
Yeah.
It becomes very opaque
Yeah.
to the point where you can't drink it.
Yeah.
If you want to drink it, what you do is you just let it sit for a while,
Yeah.
and then it becomes a sediment, and then the top layer is now clear enough for you to drink. And the analogy was that for you to live your life, carry on with your life, you can't, have that emotions present with you all the time. So you make it into a clot or a sediment
Yeah.
and wrap it so that you don't express it, but you always have it in a deep level of your mind so that you can carry on with your life.
I'm getting chills. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. But it makes
And
sense.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
In June, when the soil settles at the bottom, you can plant something. Something can grow out
Oh,
of
wow. Yeah, yeah.
it. And every so often, you can mix it up, and like that unresolved negative emotion
It sometimes comes out, right?
it goes everywhere
Yeah.
until it settles down again. It's a very good analogy.
Yeah.
It never disappears. It just settles.
And so I was trying to interpret this with the basis of this analogy and trying to think why we had to do that versus some other countries or cultures is how I'm trying to interpret this. Yeah.
Okay. I feel like we're still not doing a good job of objectifying Han, though.
Okay, so number one, I think what would be a good reason that you have negative feelings but you can't express it? Do you have a good example of your past experience or daily life that you can't do that?
That you can't express it. What do you mean?
So this is what I'm trying to get at. There are circumstances that are situational
Yeah.
or environmental
Yeah.
where
You
it's
can't control it.
difficult for you to express your negative feelings. It's suppressed by an external force or environmental circumstances.
Yeah.
I'll give you one example. Oh, a classic example of women, like older women, older generation women in Korean society, even the modern Korean society, one of their biggest han is the lack of education that they received. Because they were the daughter and because like Korea was very poor back then, so we had limited resources in the household. So if you want some of their kids to have higher education, you always chose the son, right? So there's this constant han of the lack of education from daughters,
Yeah.
but they can't express it, right? Because that was the norm or the order in which everyone followed. And there was strict hierarchy of, the parent and child. You can't really say anything about it.
Yeah.
And it was oftentimes considered weird that women, went through higher education.
Yeah.
Like, why would you just
Yeah.
marry a man and live a life of, a housewife, right?
Yeah.
So there's that han, right? There's a negative feeling, but you can't express it, but you have it. It's unresolved, and you always have it in your mind, right?
And you're saying you can't express it mostly because of the Confucian principles of hierarchy and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you're starting to understand that it's this negative feeling that you have,
But you
but
can't
it's suppressed because some societal order or a larger environmental circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, Wait, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah. The only thing I was going to say is initially when you said, okay, when you phrased the question, for me, it would have to come from some situation or circumstance that I can't control. I had no control over it.
Yeah.
I think that's what would make it feel so unjust and unfair.
Yeah.
It's like I did nothing to deserve this.
Yeah.
And I think that's similar to what you were saying in that example. Like women before, they had no control over what gender they were born as or the environment or circumstance into which they were born with the limited resources, right?
Yeah.
So that's the feeling of like the injustice or unfairness. And then what I'm now trying to think through and wrestle with is the other side of that. You said it can't be expressed, like it can't be let out.
Yeah.
It's just always there. And that's where I think of there has to be some sort of power dynamic, let's say,
Exactly.
or some cultural norm where it's not okay or acceptable to talk.
Yeah.
Right. And, for example, I don't know if we should get into that, but yeah, some sort of power dynamic where you're also at in a place where either it's culturally not acceptable or if you do say something, you're going to get, beaten back into, let's say, submission.
Yeah.
So
that's why I think that maybe LGBTQ people can resonate with this emotion because as you just described, there's like this social norm that you can't express the thing that you have. So I'm throughout this podcast, I'm going to keep on trying to extend this to a more universal level.
What I will say to that, though, is what I was going to say even before you said that, Jun, is that second part of being unable to express something. That feels to me at least uniquely, let's say, East Asian. Maybe that's not true. I'll just say that feels very un-American. Because in America, it's based on individual freedoms and rights.
Exactly.
And the power to say anything you want.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I do think this feeling of Han is going to be much less prevalent in the US.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
So that's also what I'm trying to get at is that there are two different levels of Han, right? The personal level of Han, and then there's a more collective level of Han. And the sense of Han also comes from the sense that everyone's going through this in a more broader level, collective level.
Yeah.
And I think that adds a bit of character to what Korean people feel. Like this feeling of unresolved clot of negative emotions, but sharing it, but knowing that everyone has it together also adds into the character of the Korean uniqueness of Han. But I want to start from the like foundational elemental level of where it begins in a personal level, right?
Okay.
I want to give you my personal experience of Han.
Okay.
So when I first moved to the States when I was 6 years old, I was 6, but I can clearly remember this day. And I think it's like my first couple of months of trying to settle down in school. And back then, I didn't speak a word of English, and I was put into kindergarten. So it was lunchtime in a cafeteria, and we were trying to eat lunch. And this dude next to me, he spilt my juice.
Oh, on purpose.
I don't think it was on purpose.
Okay.
I don't know. Now that you say it, maybe it was on purpose. But in my memory, it wasn't on purpose. Anyways, the teacher came and said, like, who spilled the juice? And the guy said he did. Yeah, pointing to me. And I couldn't say a word. I couldn't defend myself. And my mom told me that day I came back home and I cried and cried because I couldn't say anything. And I think that's like the moment. That's like a small version of Han, right? But then I resolved that Han coming back home and crying and telling to my mom, right? But that's like, it's a universal, I guess I want to say a more localized version of Han, a personalized version of Han that that everyone can relate to.
That I agree with.
Yeah. So that's like one thing. Do you have a similar experience?
Oh, I didn't prepare for this. I'm sure. Okay, I'll just share the first one that came to mind.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned this before. It can maybe the fact that I keep bringing it up tells you a little bit about my psyche. But again, when I was applying for colleges in the US, Asian Americans have a very unique challenge, I think, applying for the top universities. And I didn't get into the university that I really wanted, felt like I deserved. At the same time, recognizing it is a crapshoot. It's like luck of the draw in certain ways too.
Yeah.
But just that feeling of helplessness I couldn't control how I was born, right? What race I was born into. And it's just that feeling of injustice and unfairness.
Yeah.
But literally nothing I could do about it. I could express myself. And granted, back then there wasn't social media to blast or like try to bring broader awareness. But just that feeling of like helplessness against the system, let's say, when it feels stacked against you. And again, I'll just say I recognize this is a very privileged position I'm talking about, right? But that was a moment for me where I struggled with that for years. And that bitterness and resentment, but feeling like, well, what's the point of, like, I had to contain it because it's not going to help my day-to-day life.
Into a clot.
It had to clot.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would just have festered and kept, I guess, making my life
Exactly.
negative, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have, there was no positive, let's say, way to use it for me. I did let it motivate me a little bit. Like, oh, I'll show you.
Yeah.
But that feeling of unresolved, whatever, this is going to sound so petty. That clot for me did get resolved a little bit later in my life. I still remember the name of the person who was the admissions dean for that college I didn't get into. They were found out to basically be an imposter, lied about their resume, and got basically fired from that position.
What?
And this is so petty, but I was like, yeah, like that serves them right.
No,
Oh, so petty. Yeah.
It is petty, but I think everyone can relate to that, right?
Yeah.
It's very human.
Yeah.
But it's like a perfect description of what Han is in a personal level, right?
Yeah.
And you probably still have it in like some layer of your. I mean, it's a lot of it is unclotted.
There's still some there.
Yeah. That's Han. But now let's try to expand that to a national level,
Okay.
right? Let's describe a national level circumstance that this sort of suppression and, societal order or a larger force that's constantly suppressing in a national level.
I mean, you're basically laying it on a platter for me, Jun.
Yeah.
Let's say race relations in the U.S., at
Okay.
least for me.
Yeah.
Especially with the history of slavery, African Americans in the U.S., right? They were literally, physically, I don't even know. This is a very touchy subject for me to talk about.
Yeah.
But they were forcefully taken from their homes, shipped to the U.S.,
Yeah.
Forced to be slaves for so long. Eventually, through, many lives lost, etc., but lots of struggle and turmoil, got some freedoms.
Yeah.
But no one could look at the U.S. today and say, oh, everything is good and equal as far as race relations goes. And, there's some people, if you bring it up still, you're like, oh, let the past, what's the point of that, right? Maybe paying reparations or whatever. But then there's other, which is like, no, like this clearly has affected us, our entire population and community, and it's still not resolved. It's not right.
Yeah.
Right. And, race relations in the U.S. is obviously, I think, an example of this.
Yeah. So I think, maybe African American descendants still have that feeling of Han. Well, they don't have a word to pinpoint it, but I think it's a pretty shared emotion.
Yeah, I just call it maybe collective trauma.
Collective trauma.
In the society or community.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other one, June, I have to bring up is, the indigenous people of North America, Native Americans, whatever you want to call them. I think they also probably feel this at a very, very, very deep level.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think anyway, like they got their land taken away from them. They were forced into these small reservations and locations where they could live. But when you look at kind of any population group or race in the U.S., I say Native Americans are probably doing, or indigenous people, I'm not sure what the proper way is to refer to them. But yeah, they're really struggling. Super high levels of drug abuse and gambling and addiction and just really, really sad quality of life, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what your description reminded me of.
And I think, so now that I think I've effectively expanded this out to a universal level.
Okay.
Of, you can apply things like this similar emotion to other situations or other nations or races.
Yeah.
Now I want to come back to Korea.
Okay.
And give you a bit of color of how this is a bit more unique to Korean or could be. I want to find this in, so number one, you have to find a situation where this kind of thing of like, I have this unfair or unjust feeling in my mind that cannot be resolved because of a more bigger force outside, right? We have to think, we can start thinking about what are things that make this more frequent? And I think one thing is, I think you already mentioned, is Confucianism is one like very big societal order that cannot be challenged against. And number two is, again, relationism, because everything is so, imagine you can visualize a society where you're literally connected with strings with each other. If you try to, express yourself or, challenge the unfairness, it'll disrupt the entire connection that you're connected to as a whole, and it will disrupt the entire society as a whole.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of like webbed or like connected all together sort of situation again, it acts like a suppressor at some points, where, because you have to be like, you can't act so individually, because everything has to be balanced and harmony in a relation. So that's another factor that creates a lot of this unresolved emotions, I think. Yeah. So I think those factors are very unique to Korea as well.
That I don't know enough about. Wouldn't that extend to, let's say, all Confucian societies? Like, let's just say all East Asian societies, China, Japan, etc.
Yeah. So now I've regionalized it, right, to East Asia.
I see. Yeah.
But I also want to extend this analogy to a more universal level of, let's say, in a company environment.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever had because you never had experience working for a Korean company.
No.
Have you ever had experiences where you think something was unfair or unjust, but you just couldn't do it because of like hierarchy or like that relation that you have with like your peers and your manager and your subordinates?
Yeah, of course, all the time. Yeah.
Because you didn't want to disrupt that sort of thing.
I guess younger me, I would just always say what I felt.
Yeah.
If I felt like something was unjust, I would say it. Right? I would very passionately, maybe emotionally, voice it, fight for it, etc. But over time, I learned, hey, you're only maybe hurting your own reputation. It's not actually leading to any change, so why do it?
Yeah.
And so I got, over time, started to be a lot more, let's say, calculative.
Yeah.
Is this worth even bringing up? It is unfair. It is unjust. But I'm not going to fight this fight. Just not worth it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I got to the point where I guess it's maybe considered being a mature leader. But you know to pick your battles. And 9 out of 10 are not worth fighting. You want to save all of your, let's say, what's it called? Like all the goodwill and reputation and trust that you've built up. You want to wait for the one issue or one circumstance you really want to go for and try to enact change with. I guess that's how it's played out in my career. But I think anytime there is a power imbalance, we said a key part of this is there's some power differential. Yeah, you're going to feel this way. Like, I'm helpless. What's the point? I'm just going to get drowned out by, let's say, a superior voice or someone with a higher, more power, more hierarchy, whatever. Yeah.
So that we can also expand to universal level.
Well, Jun, I want to bring up a point, though.
Okay.
Because I think when you were going to say hierarchy at, like, the country level, I don't know if you said that or not. But, of course, within Korean society and, let's say, any Confucian society, there are levels of hierarchy.
Yeah.
But I will also say it feels like amongst the, let's say, East Asian countries, Korea's always been at the bottom of that national hierarchy, right? Compared to China, compared to Japan,
Yeah.
right? And so maybe within the hierarchy, not even at an individual level, but societally, right?
Yeah.
Korea feels like it's at the lowest power thing. And so that exacerbates this feeling of Han, even amongst East Asian countries.
Yeah, that's exactly a good
What were you
lead
gonna
into what I was trying to get to in
sorry.
a national level. No, it's perfect because Korea is like geopolitical situation, and let's talk about like geological location wise. It's always like squeezed between these superpowers of Japan, China, Russia, and all that. And then like during the Korean War, there was the U.S. involved, and we didn't have a lot of say in our own fate, right? But even before that, throughout Korean history, it was always a history of invasion from China, from Japan, like from Mongolia at some point. We were not a powerful country ever.
Yeah.
I think Korea is at its most powerful
Peak
state
power.
right now. But before that, it was always like a very weak country. So
My dad would always tell me that.
yeah,
Korea's history is one that has just been taken over
yeah,
by nation after nation after nation.
yeah,
Never strong enough to stand on its own or defend itself.
exactly.
And when there were those opportunities, it's just political infighting and basically greed prevented us from becoming a very, very strong country on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be clear, Korea is not the only weak country in the world, but you know, because of this geopolitical situation that we're at, it was just like, again, that as your father described, it was just constantly, you know, being invaded, you know, like being treated unfairly, and like not, yeah, basically not having our fate in our own control, kind of. So that kind of collective feeling in a national level is sort of unique to Korea. Yeah.
June, I can think of one other country. I'm sure there's more, but in my non-world cultured mind, there's one other example we should probably bring up.
Yeah.
Holocaust. And I
Yes.
think if you look at Israel as a nation, and even I feel like that term is dangerous to use now. I don't even know what the right term for it is. Anyway, if you look at Israel as a nation and maybe the Jewish population and community, they're the ones that I can draw maybe the closest parallels to.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, again, compare grief and collective trauma because I'm not comparing necessarily Korea's directly to theirs.
Yeah.
But as far as like a nation, small-ish, right, unable to defend itself, feels like there's always enemies surrounding them,
Yeah.
and yet somehow has managed to achieve some level of independence and power on its own.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously Jews in the US have a reputation of being successful and wealthy. And, they've somehow made it even after so much horrible trauma that they've undergone as a people group. So I don't know, that's the one that comes to mind. And I've mentioned it on the pod before. There's like various people groups that I think I've always felt similar to Korea. And I think maybe it's because of this feeling of Han, right? I've mentioned Israel, I've mentioned Taiwan,
Yeah.
and I think it was Lebanon, maybe Turkey.
It'll be very interesting to have someone who has more knowledge in this area, especially for like the Jewish culture and history, to compare it with our Han. With my very limited knowledge, I think one of the biggest difference that I see is, I mean, Israel probably would have gone through a very similar thing, or even worse maybe, throughout history. But I feel like the major difference is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Jewish people have a sense of that we're the chosen people. And eventually we're going through all this hardship because we're the chosen people. And like God is making it more hard on us because we are chosen. And I think that's kind of different mentality with Koreans. We don't feel that we're chosen people, and we just feel that we're always victimized. And I think that's like, in the end, could be a very different outcome. Yeah.
I see. June, that's interesting because at least in the Wikipedia definition, one of the definitions of Han is, sadness and hope. Like it's this mixed emotion of, yes, there was some injustice, we were wronged, etc. But there is hope. But you're saying this hope does not exist, let's say, for you when you think about Han in Korea?
I think it could be. That's the part where I really can't resonate with that much. But it's not, I do understand it's not an emotion with 100% despair and just no hope at all. I think there is some emotion of hope into that.
Maybe hope is how you cope. Like you have to have something to cope.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just, I don't know, gonna spiral downward into despair and give up on life.
Now I want to mention this movie that I kind of thought maybe asked you to watch last night, but maybe, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't. There's this movie called 서편제,
Okay.
which was a very popular movie back in the early 90s. And I believe it was the first movie ever to hit 1 million audience in
Korea. Okay.
Yeah,
So
which
one
was
of the
a big
first
deal.
big blockbusters. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big deal in early 90s Korean movie industry. And the whole movie is about Han.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think you would really like it.
Okay.
But it's
It's
about...
a tearjerker, right? I'm gonna cry a lot.
I think so. But it is about, the theme is pansori. Do you know what pansori is?
Mm-mm.
It's sort of like a Korean traditional folk singing type of thing. Have you ever seen like this thing where it's solo singing basically? This person just talks. Usually it's describing a story, but it's like somewhere between singing and talking.
Mm-mm.
And there's always this guy with a drum who makes the rhythm. No?
Never heard of it.
It's
Yeah.
very beautiful. You should look into it. So it's about this family that goes around the nation doing these performances, and there's a lot. So everything is about Han, and they say that in the movie there's a scene. So basically, what they're trying to say is that there's a next level where you elevate this emotion of Han, and it comes out of your voice, and then it becomes like a voice that no one can achieve.
What's
Like-
that last part?
So you elevate your emotion of Han into, some kind of emotion which is expressed through your voice. In this case of the movie,
Yeah.
where it's like the next level of
Like it transcends your voice and becomes something greater.
Yeah.
I see.
And I think in the very beginning of the podcast, when you said that you can plant something on the soil that's a sediment, I think that was a very beautiful analogy, because that Han can be sort of elevated into some other level.
Jun, you're laughing because you're like, I feel like we're trying to make it bigger than it is.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is. I think it really is that big and beautiful and deep and meaningful. Yeah.
No, I partially agree.
I know.
That's why.
You're like suppressing laughter.
Also,
yeah.
I laugh because I sense a feeling that you don't really follow along. And
No.
Yeah.
And June, this is the thing. I do follow, but having not maybe grown up here, and like you said, our generation probably doesn't experience Han like our parents do.
yeah.
I know I can't relate at that level. Even though I see it, I want to feel it. I look at stories like, the Korean War. I watched the movie Taegukgi. I watched these movies. Like,
Yeah.
isn't there one called Halmoni or whatever? So like The Road Home or something. Like these Korean movies that just make me like bawl my eyes out.
Oh, 집으로.
Jiburo, yes.
Yeah.
Like that one, right? Like,
The
But I
thing
know
with
I
the
don't
harmony and the little child. Right?
yes, yeah. Like I know I don't experience that movie at the level that probably my parents would or the older generation does. But no, I follow. I think, and if anything, that's probably one of my, I think I can experience emotion very deeply.
Yeah.
But I know I don't experience it like that older generation. Anyway, so there's two things I wanted to branch out from here. June, I wanted to mention Arirang, and I wanted to mention how the previous generation can't, I'm actually tearing up, can't express emotion. Maybe we can go into those too.
I also wanted to bring up one more thing before we move on.
Okay.
About like elevating this emotion to the next level. And this is, I think I just figured this out while I was researching. The verb that Korean people use a lot in the process of like, I have this unresolved feeling, but I'm just gonna let it sit. The verb that they use a lot is this term called 삭히다.
Okay.
Usually when you say like 분을 삭히다, basically means that I'm gonna 삭히다 this anger. And the 삭히다 means fermentation.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's the same verb that you use for kimchi.
Kimchi.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think that there's a very beautiful thing there where it's like unresolved and clotted, but it's not just describing the clottedness. There's this process of fermentation.
Maturation.
Right? Yeah.
Like into something
Yeah.
different.
So they're already thinking that it's a changing thing. It's a dynamic thing. It just doesn't sit there. It transforms to something else as you just have it sit longer and longer.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Because before you said that, I thought you were gonna say the word suppress, which is not ferment. Suppress is just to push down and let it stay there.
Yeah.
But ferment it's a much more beautiful description because it's turning into something different and
Exactly.
new.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay.
Yeah.
June, in response to the song, wait, you said bansori?
판소리.
Oh, pansori.
Yeah.
Okay. I can remember that because it sounds like jansori. So pansori,
Yeah.
I was reminded of, I think it's the national song of Korea, Arirang.
It's not the national anthem.
It's not the anthem, but I feel like it is the song of
Yes.
Korea,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
And North Korea too sings this, I believe as well, the same song. Isn't, again, very ignorant. I don't even know the lyrics to it. But when I listen to it, even the melody, it sounds like this mix between like singing and wailing. It sounds like a very sad song, but there's some hope to it.
Yeah.
Am I completely off base there?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so can you talk about Arirang and how that plays into this?
Yeah, I think Western people, if they know a little bit of Korean culture, they only know that they probably think that Arirang is a title of a song.
Yeah, that's what I think it is.
And it's more of a genre.
Oh.
There are Arirangs of different regions.
I did
And
not
the
know that.
Arirang that you know is the thing that became most famous, I think.
Okay.
It's the same level of an aria. It's a genre, right?
Like an opera solo? Is that not an aria?
No, I'm not saying that exactly what it is, but I'm saying that it's on that level of
Yes. It's
yeah,
like
it's a
the genre of
Yeah,
singing.
yeah.
Oh, well, come on. There is the Arirang song, no?
There is the Arirang song,
Yeah.
but that's one Arirang, and there are many different Arirangs.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm referring to that Arirang
yeah,
song.
I know. I was just trying to. It's just a fun fact
Okay.
that people might think it's a song title,
Yeah.
but it's a genre. I think that song has its own title, probably something Arirang, but it became so famous that it's known as Arirang.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways,
But can you talk about that song and
yeah,
what the lyrics are describing?
yeah. I the lyrics is very simple though. Actually,
Oh, okay.
the only thing that I know is Arirang, Arirang, Arario. I don't even know what Arirang means. Actually, it's not a word that's usually. It's not a word that's used in Korean language.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. But there's one section of the song where they describe a very distinctive thing. It's called 나를 버리고 가신 님은 심리도 못 가서 발병난다. Basically say that you the one who's discarding me and leaving, you won't be able to go past some length, some distance, and you're gonna have foot pain.
So it's almost like screw you type thing. Like you're leaving. I hope you can't go very far.
I don't think it's saying I hope you can't go very far. I think it's more like I hope you don't go very very far. But it's not a screw you kind of mentality. It's like I hope you can't go that far.
Okay.
Can you feel the difference?
No.
Maybe I'm not describing it, but trying to, bring this back to the topic of Han.
Yeah.
It's like that. I think that's that emotion that I can't do anything about you leaving me. I'm just gonna ferment this feeling.
Yeah.
But I hope that you won't go that far.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more for. It's not necessarily a curse upon the person leaving. It's more of a way that I can use this feeling or situation
Yeah.
to, let's say, develop myself or to even just deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's not like a screw you situation.
Got it.
It's not towards that person.
Yeah. It's more about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is how can I chama it or how
Yeah.
can I deal with it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure there was like a second verse and third verse, which I don't remember.
But would you agree that most Koreans, when they hear Arirang, it's like a deep emotion? Would you say the emotion is similar to Han? This feeling of like unresolved longing.
I think the older generation might.
I see.
The younger generation wouldn't resonate with that. And I think it's a good segue to now talk about why Han or, Chung. I don't want to talk about Chung, but anyways,
yeah.
why Han is not that a prevalent emotion in modern day Korea.
Wait, let me talk about one more thing though.
Yeah.
Maybe we've already talked about it, but I feel like whenever I try to talk to my parents or the older generation about their collective trauma in the past, they just don't want to talk about it. And I know you've mentioned before in this relationist society, we're all interconnected. We want to maintain harmony.
Yeah.
If you speak out, people are going to say, why are you speaking out? We all experienced it together.
Yeah.
But I wish they would just let it out, right? What is what is causing that generation, or maybe it's true of modern Korea too, but even, decades later, I feel like they can't verbalize or express or let out this feeling that they have, right? That injustice, resentment, bitterness, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that is one area, again, not being Jewish myself, but if I could at least project, it feels like Jewish people can express it. At least they let it out. Whereas I feel like Koreans they just keep it in. But is there anything there more than what you've already talked about?
Okay, so I think number one, it's related back to that sediment thing. Like you have to keep the water drinkable. And to do so, you have to just, not disrupt the cup again, right? Number two, I think Korean language in general is very vague. It's not designed to describe things in a very concrete or rational way. And I experienced this surprisingly in grad school.
Oh, yeah?
So in architecture school, there's this culture of the so-called critique. The way in which your work is assessed against is you have this setting of like you pin up all of your work in like a print form, like visuals and text or whatnot, in a pinboard, and then you have like this jury of like professors, and you present your work, and they will give you the critique, right? And this is what I witnessed during my study. A lot of the times when Korean students try to explain their work, Western professors don't get it. And they keep on saying like, I don't know what that means. Like, please be more concrete.
Interesting, more specific. Yeah.
Yeah. A good example is like, let's say there's this like one, this is like a usual project prompt that you get in the beginning of the semester, right? There's this like one region of the city, and there's this other region of the city, and there's like this point where they meet, right? And they're trying to build like some kind of societal functioning building in the middle of that. And Korean students usually present it in a way that, we're going to put it in the middle, and like the two societies are going to come into harmony.
Okay.
And this is such a vague term for Western professors to understand.
Yeah.
They keep on saying like, so, but how? What does harmony mean?
I see.
Like, what exactly are you trying to do? But like Korean students, usually they can't go beyond that.
I
of
see.
saying like, it's like in the middle. Like, we're going to make harmony, right?
They just keep repeating the same word, harmony,
Yeah.
harmony, harmony.
But I think, so number one, it's because if everyone's collectively having that same feeling, there isn't a need to actually describe it very well, because I know it, you know it. Like, we have a feeling that we share. So I think historically, like, Korean people aren't prepared or hadn't had that experience of trying to objectify it or rationalize it.
Yeah.
Right? Because we all feel it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And and I think that's okay. I think there's three things. Number one, it's the nature of the language.
Okay.
Number two, it's a collective, it's a shared feeling, so we're not used to actually describing it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Number three, it's because of that sediment thing. You don't want to disrupt
stir
the
it up.
harmony. Yeah.
Jun, if you could further that architecture analogy.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. How would you describe harmony now? Maybe that your mastery of English has evolved.
So I think you always have to, like in architecture school, you
Yeah.
had to describe it in like, you have to break it down into more concrete levels.
I see.
Of like, how are you trying to achieve that harmony?
I see.
Right? Like by, introducing this facility where like these two members of the two different villages can come together.
I see.
And like this and this and this.
I see.
Usually
So it's taking it one level below.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to harmonize, let's say, the surface architecture look and feel?
Yeah.
Or the cultural differences between the two. Or maybe socioeconomic differences
Yeah.
between the two sides.
Yeah.
So just like breaking it down is...
But
I see.
after having that experience, I witnessed that a lot, even in like the workplace. And I think this is a sort of a defect of Korean work culture also, because of the way that they describe things. And a lot of the times, even after having a meeting, I witnessed this a lot in everyday work culture.
This is very interesting.
Where we felt like one was aligned,
Yeah.
and then and then we realized that everyone was thinking about the different things.
Interesting.
And I think I don't want to say it's 100% about the language, but I think it owes a lot to it because we use a lot of vague terminologies that we just assume that everyone just knows what that means, but eventually it wasn't. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard Korean referred to as like, or the language being used in a vague way. I've never heard that before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe like you guys just align on the high level concept.
Yeah.
And because you're in harmony, you don't want to disrupt that harmony. You don't go down.
Yeah. I want to say this is my hypothesis.
Yeah.
All cultures that are more collective society would have a more vague way of expressing things.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because they feel like they share everything.
I mean, there's like the cultural level understanding of the word, but that word or concept, it is individualized. Like there's a personal experience that you have with what that word might mean, etc. And that varies, I mean, obviously person by person.
Yeah.
I think I remember, I'm not bringing this up because of your colorblindness, but I remember Jun reading an article, but you take any two individuals, their understanding of what blue is might differ person by person.
Yeah.
Right. And there's not an exact science to what that color means. And we all interpret it differently.
Yeah.
Right. Even though it's the same color collectively.
Yeah.
I think that could be happening here too. Like the word that in Korean business society, that they arrive on is this vague collective word that we all generally have consensus on.
Yeah.
When you really dig into the details, it carries different nuance, etc. That comes from a personal perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what goes unspoken, let's say, in Korean business contexts.
Yes.
And that's what causes maybe some confusion down the line.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for the Western audience, I think you probably can experience this in a more, I guess, localized level of like your relationship with someone else or like within your family, right? Because if you're sharing experiences now, I think your language becomes more vague, right? Like that thing.
Yeah.
And everyone just know, right?
Yeah.
But if it's expanded, imagine that expanded onto a national level, and it's becoming more vague. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting. All right.
Now I want to talk about why this emotion of Han feels like a bit more foreign to modern day Korean generations, or it's not a thing that's used a lot, or it's even considered something that's too old fashioned.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I have a different conclusion, so I want to get into that. Yeah.
My explanation with that is pretty straightforward. The environmental circumstances that suppress themselves has loosened up a lot, and it's now we're in a society where people can individually express things more clearly. And me personally, I'm already witnessing this in the workplace where if I work with these like Gen Z people,
Yeah.
I can already see a very big difference in attitude in their workplace.
Yeah.
Because even me, because like the Gen Zs that I'm referring to are at least 10 years younger than me. And I can already, even me viewing them, it's very odd and foreign to me, their attitude.
Yeah.
Because they say whatever. Like, I'm not saying this in a negative way.
Sure, yeah.
But like things that I would have just not said because I wanted to maintain the social, I guess, order.
Yeah.
And something that I can just like work around than just like directly expressing that. I think Gen Z people, even Korean Gen Z people, they just express it very clearly.
I see.
Yeah.
I think that's healthy.
It is healthy, yeah. So I don't think it's a negative thing at all, but it's very surprising.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, like that kid just said that in a meeting with the CEO. Wow, that's
and it's
amazing.
causing a generational divide too, right?
Yeah.
It's furthering that. Okay.
I think it's healthy, yeah.
Would you also say, maybe this is not true, but do you think the younger generation, or let's just say our generation in Korea, we probably experienced less trauma than our parents' generation? I think that's pretty fair to say, right?
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So it's coupling both the reduced, let's say, national trauma along with this growing sense of individualism.
Exactly.
And that's creating less Han today. Interesting. I wanted to bring it from a different perspective, though. Tell me if I'm taking this too far. But if we define Han as this, unresolved resentment, bitterness, anger at some injustice that you can't express, I feel like it has to come out some way. And in my mind, it comes out in ultra competitiveness.
Yeah, interesting.
It's like, they're at the national level or collective level. Everyone feels this feeling of, okay, we were colonized by Japan, right? The U.S. maybe came and saved us, but as a nation, we were so poor, we had nothing. And you can't express that. What's the point? There's no purpose. But how does that come out and manifest?
Yeah.
One thing I see, it just manifests in really hard work and like almost killing yourself to get back what you lost. And then also this competitiveness that I think really defines Korean society today, which is like, well, everyone else, they have it. It's unjust. I'm going to work so hard to try to get it, right? I know, does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, it does resonate with me. And I think it totally makes sense. And you can add a generational dimension to that. I think we partially mentioned this in some education episode we did in the past.
Yeah.
But I saw this very interesting article describing the education landscape of Korea explained in a generational manner, because as I explained in the early parts of this podcast of how a very common Han amongst the older women generation is the lack of education that they experience. What they do is that they project it to their offsprings. Because I have this Han of like not getting proper education, I'm going to be super I will do my best to
do the other extreme, right?
Yeah, do the other extreme. Like my daughter, like she's going to have the best education, whatever. And oftentimes that results into super competitiveness and pressure to the next generation.
Yeah.
And then the third generation is the generation that is like the more modern, like the students that are in school right now is getting projected from the Han of being being too pushed.
Yeah.
And they try to overly liberate.
Just bouncing back and forth between these extremes
and say bit. Like, oh, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's like the generational, descendancy of Han.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I'm very mindful. I don't want to directly compare trauma across generations because every generation I do think experiences it, but maybe in a different way. But I think, so you do agree that there is this Han that still comes forth, but maybe it's due to different trauma and it manifests itself just a little bit differently today.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jude, I think that's all the time we have for today.
Yeah.
I do think we did a good job, at least for me, of better understanding the core components of Han. I still feel a bit unsettled overall. Like, I feel like we didn't get to a lot of the really deep emotions and like almost not nonsensical, but unexpected, just like anger, jealousy, like these feelings that just come out sometimes from Koreans in general that like they're always suppressing, but sometimes it just comes out. I feel like we didn't get to touch on that at all. But in general, yeah, I feel like at least I have I would say a better understanding of at its core what Han is.
Yeah, I think it's that's also, I can explain that rationally, because it's just natural to think if you're suppressing something and if it comes out with more pressure, right? So I think that's what happens. Yeah, maybe I simplified it too much.
No.
I think that's the core cause of that. Anyways, do you think so in the beginning of this episode, I said my goal is to quote unquote objectify Han or rationalize Han to a more universal level. Do you think I succeeded?
Yeah. I think I understand at least what makes Han. Han, how other nations or people groups would probably have similar Han, but why Korea is unique in a sense too, right? Compared to other, let's say, at least East Asian nations or others. And I do think everyone in the world can experience Han at a personal level, but rather what makes Han, let's say, uniquely Korean is that collective Han that the entire country and every person feels collectively. And Yeah. Okay.
The reason why I wanted to also rationalize it, because the one attitude that I don't like about Koreans is trying to make Han as every excuse for everything that they do.
Yeah.
And like put one blanket over so many problems. And I think to resolve things, I think you have to look it into a more objective, through a more objective lens. That's what I wanted to do for this episode. Anyways,
I say mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. And number 2, I think one of the big lessons is look how more structured we are if we prepare even like 2 hours in advance.
Yeah.
I think I'm satisfied with the overall structure. I think we were able to get into more deeper things in a more compact way, because we didn't go that long for this episode, I think.
It felt more, but June, I will counter that by saying our last published episode on K-dramas was probably one of our least structured, meandering, one I felt really bad about.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people liked it.
I think so. Maybe structured is not that good. I mean,
Again, we're not an educational podcast, right? We're a thought-provoking.
I mean, you know me, how I want to be very structured.
I'm on the other extreme.
Yeah, so I think personally it was satisfying.
I can tell that you like having structure and you feel more prepared to talk about it. This episode for me felt less natural.
Really?
I felt it's a good episode, don't get me wrong.
It's more educational, I think.
Yes, it's more educational. For me, it felt, like I said, I just want to like ramble about like, why are Koreans always so angry? And why does it just come out?
Let's do Han part 2, where we don't prepare anything and just rant on and on. Yeah.
I do think, okay, at least for me now, having talked about Han and Jung, I feel like Jung comes from Han. Right, this feeling of we all are in it together. We have this collective trauma that we all share, and we all need each other in a sense to survive.
That makes sense.
And so it does make sense though, like with the decline in Han because of those two things you said. Maybe less collective trauma and more individualism, being able to say it and not having to have it ferment. The equivalent loss in Jung. Yeah. But anyway,
that's a very nice way to connect the two concepts.
Okay. Again, June. We have 2 new Patreon subscribers since last time. First up, Jess. Thank you, Jess.
Jess, thank you.
And second is Jen. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
As always, if you feel like this podcast was worth 25 cents, please consider supporting us on Patreon for $1 a month. Yeah. Your support means a lot to us.
Yeah, so that we don't have unresolved plots. No, I was just joking.
Yeah. Clearly, there's no trauma.
There's no trauma at all.
Although, June, we can preview a future episode.
What is?
I can't wait to respond to some of the
comments. The very toxic ones.
Yeah, I want to read them, respond to them. So. All right.
Do you want to do like a version where we deliberately go to the hidden comments?
No. What I do want to do is pick out some of the popular reels.
Yeah.
Not even popular. You pick out, or we both can pick out some of the comments.
Yeah.
That either are confusing for me, or highlight some deep cultural thing, or are just mean for me to read.
Yeah.
And then we'll respond and discuss them. I think that'll be a great episode.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
See you.
Oh, wait. Before we end, I want to link the movie that I mentioned, because I think it was publicly available on YouTube.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We don't always put in links in the show notes. We want to be better about this.
Yeah.
But we'll link a few things in this week's show notes, including the movie about Han that June referenced. So.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. I also realized something interesting.
Yeah.
Our clothes match a lot.
Really?
Like in a broader sense.
T-shirts and shorts?
No, last time we were like all in like bluish.
Oh, I didn't notice.
Like the color thing.
Yeah.
Did you not realize that?
Mm-mm.
Not 100%, of course.
I think if you pick any 2 people in Korea, odds are they're gonna match.
But like last time, we were all wearing bluish. Well, I can't speak for color.